Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Bradley was typing the electric bill account number into the utility company's website when he noticed the username field was already filled in. That struck him as odd. It was his wife Claire's laptop. The password field was filled in too. On instinct, he clicked Log In. A different tab loaded, revealing an inbox with her name in the top corner. For a moment, he thought about logging out and pretending he hadn't seen anything. But something pushed him to scroll down. It was as if a silent alarm had gone off inside him. He clicked on a conversation that looked recent. The contact was saved simply as Derek. The first messages were harmless, compliments about her outfit that day, comments about work. But as he scrolled further, the tone shifted. There were photos, suggestive emojis, phrases that, even without context, cut like a blade. Yesterday was unforgettable. When you hugged me like that, I felt I was exactly where I wanted to be. Bradley stopped breathing for a few seconds. The blood seemed to drain from his face. He scrolled further. Can't wait for the weekend. Does that hotel near the lake still take last-minute reservations? He reread each line as if it were a shouted confession. The next few hours passed without him noticing. The pain didn't come in waves. It was steady, solid. He left the laptop on the kitchen table and went to the bedroom, but he couldn't stay there. The neatly made bed, with both pillows perfectly aligned, seemed to mock him. He went to the kids' room. Tyler, 17, was asleep with his headphones dangling. Sophia, 14, slept peacefully. They were the reflection of everything he and Claire had built together. And now, that castle had cracks running through every wall. Anger rose inside him, but doubt rose with it. What had he done wrong? Had he failed as a husband? Had he spent too much time stuck in routine, in work, in silently bearing the pressure of providing for everything without complaint? That night, for the first time in many years, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room, staring at the clock, as if it could speed up or rewind. His mind replayed dates, events, birthday parties, family trips, wedding anniversaries. Had Claire been with someone else all this time? The thought hammered at him relentlessly. He remembered her smile in photos, the hugs in front of the kids, the whispered advice before bed. Everything now seemed fake. Every memory was tainted by images he hadn't seen but now imagined in vivid detail. The next day, he pretended everything was normal to protect the kids. He made breakfast, drove Sophia to school, picked up Tyler from the gym, just like always. But inside, nothing was the same. The silence between him and Claire was thick. She seemed not to realize she'd been found out, or maybe she was pretending everything was still fine. Bradley watched her every move, searching for signs that had always been there but he'd never wanted to see. The long outings, the messages she typed while hiding the screen, the longer showers before leaving for work. Everything made sense now. That afternoon, he saw Claire getting dressed with more care than usual. She wore a perfume he didn't even know she'd bought. Flawless makeup, a tight dress, heels she almost never wore. He asked her, just to hear what she'd say. Big meeting with the board. Derek's presenting a new project and asked me to be there. The name slipped off her lips as if it meant nothing. As if it weren't the same name Bradley had read in those messages the night before. He just looked at her and nodded, as if it didn't matter. But inside, each word from her felt like an explosion in his chest. Over the week, he tried to act rationally. He looked Derek up online. Found out he was much younger, single, a Harvard graduate, holding a high position at Claire's company. Success, youth, charisma, all the things she might have felt she'd lost over the years with him. But Bradley didn't see himself as a victim. He knew he'd given her stability, respect, family. Even without grand romantic gestures, he'd never lacked commitment. What he was getting in return now was betrayal. Loneliness became his companion during long nights. He avoided going out, avoided friends. He kept the secret as if protecting the kids depended on it. And in a way, it did. He knew the impact would be devastating if they found out. He preferred to carry it alone until he figured out what to do. But each day, the weight grew harder to bear. He began to feel like a stranger in his own home. And worst of all was seeing Claire smile as if nothing were out of place. One Saturday morning, Tyler asked if they'd still do their traditional summer fishing trip. Bradley hesitated. It was the first time in years he'd considered canceling. But he looked at his son and said yes. In that moment, he realized he needed to preserve the rituals that protected their childhood. Even if the world around them was crumbling, they still deserved stability. It was the least he could offer while deciding what to do about the woman he'd sworn to love forever, but who now carried another man's name in her lips and messages. With every gesture from Claire, every new flimsy excuse, the collapse of trust became more obvious. He was no longer the man who believed everything could be fixed with a conversation. This was bigger than words. It was a deep, irreversible rupture. But before taking any action, before confronting her, he needed to understand whether he wanted revenge, redemption, or just peace. And he didn't know yet. All he knew was that something inside him had changed. Forever. Claire came home late that Wednesday. She left her heels by the door and tossed her bag onto the couch with a sigh. Bradley was already waiting. Sitting at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on the glass of water spinning between his fingers, he waited for the moment when the truth would be pulled from her mouth. Not by accident, not by pressure. But by justice. She approached with her phone in hand and asked if he'd eaten dinner. He responded with another question. He wanted to know if she loved someone else. Claire froze. She tried to smile, trying to turn it into a poorly timed joke. But seeing his face, she realized there was no room for excuses or theater. He said Derek's name. And before she could even respond, he spoke about the messages, the weekend plans, the compliments, the photos, the parallel life. Claire swallowed hard. The mask fell. She sat across from him and, for a few seconds, said nothing. But no silence could hold back the avalanche. She confessed. Said she hadn't planned it, that it started with exchanged glances, a work lunch, a ride home. That she'd felt alone inside the marriage, even though she had everything. That Derek made her feel something she thought was dead. That she felt desired, heard, seen. Bradley didn't respond right away. He let her talk, because he needed to hear it all to understand the depth of the chasm. She apologized. Repeated that it was a mistake. That she still loved him. That she loved the family. That this didn't change how she felt about the kids. But every word, even the sweetest ones, sounded like a knife. Bradley closed his eyes. Not to hold back tears, but to try to remember the last time he'd truly believed her. The weight of what he heard wasn't just about betrayal. It was about being replaced, deceived, discarded by someone who promised to stay. He stood up, went to the bedroom, grabbed a small suitcase, and threw in some clothes. Claire asked where he was going. He said he needed air, time, distance. That he couldn't stay under the same roof after everything. She tried to stop him, stepped closer, touched his arm, said they could try. He pulled away. Said it wasn't the time to think about the future, that right now he could only deal with the pain. He left in the car with no destination. He drove until the tank was half empty and stopped at a cheap motel by the roadside. In the days that followed, no one at home knew where he was. He called the kids, sent messages asking if they were okay, if they needed anything. They noticed his absence, but since Claire told them he was traveling for work, they accepted it without asking too many questions. Sophia mentioned he seemed sad in his messages. Tyler said he dreamed of his father sitting alone in a field. Claire pretended everything was normal, but inside she was crumbling. She didn't know if he'd come back. She knew he had more than enough reason never to return. Bradley stayed away for 4 days. In the motel room, he thought about everything. The kids' childhood, the holidays, the birthdays, the little promises. He also thought about all the times he'd shown up, even when tired, even when exhausted after work, even without recognition. He remembered the advice he gave Tyler about dignity. The way Sophia rested her head on his shoulder on Sundays. And that's when he understood. He couldn't make impulsive decisions. He needed to choose with calm, with logic, with clarity. He returned home in silence. The kids were at friends' houses. Claire was startled to see him walk in with the suitcase. She wanted to talk, but he cut her off. He said the decision was made. That there was no room to rebuild what had been destroyed so carelessly. That forgiveness was possible, but forgetting was impossible. That love wasn't enough to live on. And that no matter how much she swore she regretted it, he didn't want to continue. She cried. Begged. Said this was a mistake. That they had a history. That they'd been together for over 2 decades. That what they had was strong. He listened, but didn't respond emotionally. He said the strength of a relationship wasn't in time, but in respect. And respect had ended when she chose to hide, lie, and give herself to another man while an entire family waited for her at home. He said he didn't want yelling, disputes, or legal battles. He wanted a peaceful separation that ensured stability for the kids. That was the only thing that mattered right now. Claire tried to argue, but saw it was useless. The man standing before her had already left on the inside. What she was asking for was no longer possible. That same week, she moved in with her sister, Monica. She took few things. Told the kids she needed some time, that their father would take care of them for now. Tyler was suspicious. Sophia asked if they were separating. Claire said everything would be okay. But inside her heart, there was only silence. Bradley watched it all from a distance. He organized the household routine, divided school schedules, meals, study time. Went back to working from home. Took care of the kids as he always had, but now with a different kind of tiredness in his eyes. Sometimes, when he was alone on the porch, he'd hold his phone and open old photos of the couple. He'd see the frozen happiness in smiles that no longer made sense. Other times, he'd just stare at the screen for long minutes until the battery died. It was his way of processing everything. He didn't regret leaving. Or coming back. But he carried a quiet desire that followed him everywhere, that the person responsible for all this destruction would know the full extent of the damage he caused. That Derek Holloway wouldn't go on living as if he'd won some casual game. Something inside Bradley wouldn't let him accept that injustice in silence. And that thought grew, day after day, until it became a plan. And the plan, until it became action. Bradley wasn't in a hurry. From the moment he decided to separate from Claire, every next step was calculated with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime trained to act strategically. He knew resentment was a dangerous feeling, one that could corrupt whatever good was left. So he took a deep breath before making any move. He didn't want to act on impulse, or carry guilt afterward. But inside him, there was one certainty: Derek wouldn't walk away unscathed. He spent days thinking about what could legitimately hit Derek. Nothing involving cheap revenge, public exposure, or confrontations. That would only feed the ego of someone who'd already destroyed a family without a second thought. What Bradley wanted was deeper. He wanted justice. He wanted life to make that man answer for his actions. So he did what he knew best: investigate. He called Marcus Dean, an old friend from his army days, now working as a security consultant and private investigator in Atlanta. Marcus answered on the second ring and, even without knowing all the details, agreed to help without hesitation. Years of brotherhood in the trenches create that kind of loyalty. In the days that followed, they started gathering public records on Derek, companies under his name, financial statements, property transactions, hidden partners, anything available in official records. What started as a simple search turned into a complex puzzle. Derek wasn't just a charismatic executive. He also owned 2 consulting firms operating as fronts. He declared values far below what he actually moved, used third parties to mask income, and held contracts with providers who didn't even exist. It was a well-orchestrated scheme, but with obvious flaws for someone who knew where to look. In one of Marcus's analyses, they found international accounts in tax havens and property purchases under straw names. Bradley quietly compiled everything. Each document was filed with date, source, and a brief summary. He knew any misstep could invalidate the evidence. So he took care not to rush. He sent encrypted emails to Marcus, hid copies on USB drives, and printed physical versions of everything. He wanted to be sure that even if someone tried to bury it, there'd be enough trails to open an investigation. One night, while Tyler slept in the next room and Sophia watched a movie in the living room, Bradley finished organizing the dossier. Each page represented a piece of Derek's arrogance being dismantled. There was no pleasure in it, just a cold sense of duty being fulfilled. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate, he just looked at it all and understood it was time to act. He sent the full package to the IRS, the federal agency that investigates tax crimes in the United States, using an anonymous but traceable service. He didn't include his name, but made sure to include all necessary data so no evidence would be ignored. Weeks passed. Life went on with the adjusted routine. Tyler focused on football. Sophia buried herself in books. Claire stayed at her sister's, trying to start over, removed from the routine she herself had broken. Bradley didn't mention anything to the kids. He kept his composure, schedules, meals, as if the world were in order. But inside, he counted the days. Every new piece of news was analyzed. The business section of the newspaper became required reading. Court websites, investigation forums, all were followed closely. Then, an ordinary morning turned into a milestone. Marcus called. His voice was serious, but with a tone Bradley recognized well, the certainty of a mission accomplished. He said federal agents had executed a search warrant at Derek's office. Computers were seized. Contract copies were confiscated. The investigation had officially opened. Derek had been suspended from the company while providing explanations, and local press was beginning to suspect something big was happening. Bradley thanked him and hung up. He looked out the window and sat in absolute silence for a moment. That feeling, that finally, something was being set right. The next day, confirmation came through the news. Derek Holloway was arrested on charges of tax evasion, accounting fraud, and asset concealment. Bail had been denied. The report said the accused could face up to 15 years in prison. No mention of his personal life, or the affair with Claire. To the world, Derek was just another successful man who fell due to corruption. But to Bradley, he was the man who tried to destroy his home and was now facing the consequences. Claire saw the news on her phone. She called Bradley almost immediately, but he didn't answer. She sent a message saying she wanted to talk, that she needed to understand if he was involved. Bradley read it, deleted it, and left the phone on the table. He had nothing to say. Silence was his answer. The same absence of words Claire offered when she betrayed him. The same indifference Derek showed when getting involved with a married woman. Now, each one faced their own harvest. That night, Bradley went out to dinner with the kids. Sophia ordered a burger, Tyler got ribs. During the meal, they laughed at an old joke, reminisced about family trips. For the first time in a long while, Bradley felt true calm. It wasn't complete happiness, but it was stability. A quiet certainty that he'd done the right thing. While justice followed its course, he rebuilt what truly mattered, his relationship with his kids and with his own conscience. No public victory shouted from rooftops meant more than the peace of looking into his children's eyes and knowing that, even wounded, he'd stayed standing. Bradley's life took on a new rhythm. After Derek's arrest, the days felt lighter, not from joy, but from relief at seeing things fall back into place. With the routine organized, he began spending more time with the kids. Sophia loved making pancakes on Saturdays, and Tyler started calling him to talk about things he used to keep to himself. Conversations stopped being just about school or chores and began revolving around life, values, the future. It was as if the bond between them had gained a new layer, more honest, more solid. They were healing too, in their own way, but healing. And Bradley, for the first time in months, truly felt at home. Claire tried contacting him frequently. Sent long messages, then short ones, then just emojis. Sometimes she called and hung up after a few seconds. One night, she left an envelope in the mailbox with a handwritten letter. She said she understood his decision, but still missed the family, knew she'd messed up badly, and that regret weighed on her daily. She apologized again and mentioned the kids fondly, saying she didn't go a day without thinking of all three. Bradley read the letter twice. Then he put it in the drawer with the old photo albums. He didn't reply. He felt that, at that moment, any conversation would only reopen wounds that were already healing. He didn't wish for her to suffer, but he also didn't see space for her in what he was rebuilding. The house they lived in remained with him and the kids. Some changes were made. The old couch was donated, walls got new paint, old photos were replaced with simple artwork. Tyler helped set up a workout area in the backyard, while Sophia requested a new reading nook by the window. It was as if, together, they wanted to create an environment that didn't remind them so much of the past. Bradley allowed these changes naturally, understanding it was also a process of liberation for them. Even on hard days, when nostalgia hit or memories appeared uninvited, there was a sense of dignity. He knew that, even wounded, he hadn't lost himself. One Sunday afternoon, Sophia asked to talk to him. It was just the two of them at home. She held a notebook and said she'd written a school essay about her dad. Bradley adjusted himself in his chair and listened carefully. It was a simple text, but full of feeling. She said her father was a man who had fallen off an emotional mountain, but instead of screaming for help, used his hands to build a ladder back up. That he taught her, without words, how to get up when everything seems lost. That he was stronger than any superhero, because he saved the family without needing a cape. Bradley couldn't hold back his tears. He hugged his daughter for long minutes. In that gesture, he understood that all the effort had meaning. That even though he hadn't chosen this pain, he'd managed to turn it into something greater. Some time later, Tyler also came to him. He wanted to talk about college, about moving out, about growing up. Said he wanted to be like him, but not in the sense of copying. He wanted to learn how to respond with balance, face challenges with intelligence, not use pain as an excuse to hurt others. Bradley listened quietly, but his heart vibrated. Slowly, he realized the real legacy he'd leave wasn't material, or based on what he built with Claire. It was the example he set in the hardest moments. It was the posture of someone who didn't use betrayal as an excuse to become a bitter man. It was the choice to remain fair even when he had every reason not to be. Time passed. The story with Claire became a memory that didn't hurt as much. Derek faced the consequences of his own actions. Bradley moved forward with his kids, guiding, caring, teaching. And looking back at everything he'd lived, he didn't see himself as a victim, nor as a hero. He saw himself as someone who loved, who fell, who bled inside, but chose to get up without dragging anyone else down with him. And that, for him, was more than enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.